everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with EBB Childbirth Class Parent Shelitha Owens about her home waterbirth story. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, and I'm a nurse with my PhD and the founder of Evidence-Based Birth. Join me each week as we work together to get evidence-based information into the hands of families and professionals around the world. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. See ebbirth.com/disclaimer for more details. Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Decker, pronouns she, her, and I will be your host for today's episode. Today, I am so excited to welcome EBB Childbirth Class graduate Shelitha Owens. Before we interview Shelitha, I want to let you know that if there are any detailed content or trigger warnings, we'll post them in the description or show notes that go along with this episode. And now I would like to introduce our honored guest. Shelitha Owens, pronouns she, her, is an environmental policy manager who lives in Oaklawn, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, with her husband Bobby, their dog Reeses, and their new baby Alexander, who was born on June 18 of last year. Having a biology background, Shelitha has always been fascinated with anatomy and was curious about pregnancy and birth. After having her son at home with a planned water birth, Shelitha's interest in birth work skyrocketed as she enjoys talking to new and expecting parents about their birth stories. We are so thrilled that Shelitha is here. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca. I'm super excited to be here.
We love having our graduates of the childbirth class come on the podcast, and I know you are a podcast listener yourself.
I am a huge podcast listener. I literally binged your entire show during my pregnancy.
So you can be an inspiration to other people who are like, maybe someday I'll have my birth story
Yes.
featured or my experience featured. So
Yeah.
how did you find out about EBB to begin with in the
Um,
childbirth class?
so I found the podcast. I got pregnant in October last year, and I decided to just like listen to some audios. Like I wanted to hear some positive birth stories, and specifically I was looking for positive Black birth stories. So I just went on podcasts and I started to find some podcasts. I think I was listening to a podcast called Natal and another one called Birth in Color. And one of the episodes, it might have been Birth in Color or another one, somehow somebody mentioned you or your podcast. And every time I had a mention, I would go find it. And so I downloaded the podcast and started from episode 1. And I was just like, whoa, this is exactly what I wanted. Like stories, as well as like picking through like how birth went and education and all those things that really spoke to me. And I just absorbed all of it. It was great.
And also interviews with birth workers, which
Yes.
sounds like you're curious about birth work. So we'll have to go into that more later. And how did you find your instructor, Julie Force?
So I think we took the course in February or March, I believe. And I wanted the course because I really like the podcast. I like the information. And my husband at the time, I had been telling him, what I had been hearing and what I was listening from your podcast. But I wanted a birth class that he could take and would really also speak to him. So I knew I was going to end up taking your birth course. So I just looked online to find it, and Julie happened to be the good time frame we were in. I wanted to do a little bit early just in case something happened and, baby came earlier. And Julie ended up being our instructor, and she was great. She was really amazing.
And you both share the experience of kind of being in the Chicago land area as
Which
well.
worked out great because she was able to look up some things for me in the background, even though we didn't end up using them. But she had worked with my midwife team before. So that was kind of reassuring knowing that she's like, oh, yeah, they're really great and blah, 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 blah. So it was nice.
What was your experience like taking the class with Bobby?
It was really good. It was a little difficult because his work schedule second shift. So we kind of had to finesse taking the course like when on his lunch break. So he was actually on a computer at work while I was on a computer here at home taking it. But it was really good. He really benefited from being able to ask questions and having the hands-on with Julie. And I think at the end, especially with the home birth, even though at this point he was on board, it really helped him feel more confident about having the home birth and about his role as my husband and the father of our unborn child to be there and to be a good support system. So he was really excited by the time we had been done with the class.
So it felt like you were really looking for something that would help prepare your partner to be the primary support person.
Yes, I had a doula. My best friend, actually, she is a labor and delivery nurse and has been for the past, I think, 9 years. But she just took doula training about last year. So she was also there. But I knew that I wanted Bobby to be as involved as he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the course really, really helped him. He did phenomenal, by the way. He was so good.
So you mentioned home birth a couple of times. Like, what inspired you to plan a home birth, and how did you go about finding a midwife and getting that all set up?
Yeah, so I took nursing courses with my friend, my doula. Her name is Vaisha Kareem. And we were in a course and they showed us a course, The Business of Being Born, which is like everybody's kind of pseudo intro into home birth. And it really spoke to me like, wow, that is a lot of information when it comes to hospital births. And being a Black woman, I also knew like how our outcomes sometimes can be, even if they're not death related, but sometimes they can be a bit more dramatic than other ethnicities. And I am the type of person who does not like to be told what to do, especially when it comes to my body and my time. So I kind of knew that hospital maybe wouldn't be my jam just because I didn't want to have to be fighting for what I knew I was going to want and what I wasn't going to compromise for in a hospital setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I wanted home birth. By the time I got pregnant, I just looked around the Chicagoland area to see what was available. And funny thing is, of course, this was 2020, the summer. So the pandemic had just started. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to find these midwives. There were like maybe 4 or 5 in the Chicagoland area. I'm going to find them, do the interviews with all of them, and, find the best one to fit. Well, everybody was trying to do home birth. So I was terrified that I was not going to be able to get somebody to, do a home birth for me because all these people now just wanted to have them because of the pandemic and how hospitals were at the time. And I'm like, I've been wanting to do this for 12 years now, and this would really hurt me if I couldn't. But it worked out. We found Gentle Birth. We did an interview. They fit, and we kind of just went with them. They're a good company. I have a few midwives on hand. They're like, it's kind of hospital like. They are a home birth midwifery team in Chicago. I believe they're the only one that's you can go use your insurance through them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like midwives and midwife assistants on call. So even if you don't end up with a midwife that you may have been seeing, somebody will be there for you. So,
Okay. Did they have like an office you go to your appointments, or did they come to your
yes.
home?
They had a few offices. We went
Mm-hmm.
to one that was close to us in Oak Park, and just like a normal doctor setting, you make your time. I went the normal amount of time. Then towards the end is once a week, every 2 weeks, whatever. They did a home visit towards the end where they just set you up to ask you where you're going to have the birth and everything, look around, make sure everything's okay. I think it was good for Bobby too because it was very much a normal, like, type of doctor setup type of thing, but it was just midwives and home birth. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And what did Bobby say when you told him that you wanted a home birth?
He was nervous, and I had a OBGYN. I still have her. So when I first got pregnant, we just want to go check and do the normal, like, hey, I'm pregnant. What do I do now type of situation. I knew I wanted a home birth. So we went there and we were talking to like hospital situation because he was still kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. At this point, we hadn't even interviewed any midwives yet. And it didn't go so great. I knew I wanted a home birth. My doctor was like, no. And then they were talking about, all the things that could go wrong and everything like that. And Bobby started getting super nervous. And I was a little upset because I was like, well, I'm going to have a home birth anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
either you're going to be on board or you're going to be not be. So he wasn't so keen on it. But I will say by time we did the initial interview, and by the time we got up there in person and he came to all of my appointments, he was much more confident.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, once we took your course, then he was like, he loved it. And now he tells me now, like, that decision was like one of the best things that I brought to him because we have a couple other friends who've had births since. And, it doesn't seem as amazing as ours was so
Mm-hmm.
far.
Yeah. And was there anything in particular about the class that you think helped prepare you for a home birth? Because I know some people are like, well, I don't need to take a class because I'm having the baby at home, so I don't need to worry about all the interventions and everything. What was it about the class that you felt prepared you for a home birth?
The best part of the class for me that prepared me for the home birth was the discussion on the stages of labor. That I think was probably the most critical thing because during birth, I knew in my head when I felt like I was transitioning into each stage. So maybe I didn't see it, but when I'm like, okay, this is different, this is how I feel, and I'm pretty confident I was right. And it helped me stay. I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit of an outlier because I was really excited for birth, actually. A little bit nervous, but more excited. And had planned for so long. So I was just kind of along for the ride. But the class really helped me see, like, okay, this is where I am. This is what I'm feeling. By the time the midwives got there, I thought I knew where I was. They did check me. It was a satisfactory outcome at that time. But yeah, that made me feel real confident. It didn't feel like it was too long. It didn't feel like the pain was, crazy that I couldn't do this. I was like, okay, this is crazy about transition time. But I'm like, I think I have to be in transition now with how things escalated. Like this has to be it. So it made me feel good. Like, okay, I'm like at the finish line and everything seems to be going well.
So it's almost like the more knowledge you had about your body and how the process works, the more powerful you felt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. It made me feel very confident. At not any point through my birth did I feel that I had any fear because I felt like things were going well. I felt like I knew what my body was doing. I knew that my support team had me. I knew that they were educated enough to have me as well, not just to be concerned about baby, but also myself. So yeah, it was really good. The class helped me with that part, and I think it overall helped Bobby because he did phenomenal the whole birth. He was. I don't think I told him to do anything really the whole time, which is really great.
He kind of already knew what he was supposed to be doing and when
Yeah.
and everything.
Yes. With the class, it really helped him. Like, okay, this is what you can do when this is going on. Like, I was basically just breathing, and he was getting the tub ready and getting snacks. And during the day while we were here, he was going on runs, getting us food, helping with massages. Like, he was good.
So before the birth story, kind of take us to the end of your pregnancy. What was your mindset like? I know you said you were excited to give birth. Was there anything else going on that you were working on?
At the end of pregnancy, I had a lot of emotions. It actually had been a really rough year for us. I got pregnant in October, and shortly after, my brother passed away. And my cousin, the same literally 12 hours, my cousin had a stroke that ended up putting her in the hospital. So it was kind of rough. There were a lot of emotions for me, and my family was impacted really significantly. We're very close, extended family. So my mom losing her son, finding out I'm pregnant, helping out significantly with my cousin when she came back home because she had been on a coma for a month, I think, and she needed a lot of support with my aunt. She has MS. So it was just a lot. We bought a new house, which was great, except I ended up having to do a lot of stuff on my own. I thought I would have more of a support, but everybody was supporting my cousin, which was obviously something I wanted, but it was kind of lonely. My husband was still working second shift and trying to do stuff around the house, waddling around trying to get a house ready, because I wanted everything to be ready for postpartum so I wouldn't have to do anything house related. And my son's due date was close to my brother's birthday. So I was a little bit worried about that as well. I didn't know how I'd feel if he came on his birthday, but I kind of didn't want him to because I want to remember my brother's birthday independently. I don't want it to get overshadowed by the birth of my son. So yeah, I had a lot of emotions. Fortunately, I was able to work from home the last week before my 40 weeks hit. I stayed working and they let me work a couple days from home about a month before that. So I was getting enough rest, which is something I really was focusing on. just trying to be well rested in my body because I knew I had been doing a lot of stuff trying to get the house together. And I knew that I did have kind of a bit of a heavy emotional state. So I was just trying to make sure that I had just make my headspace and body not be tired. And I actually ended up taking part of a hypnobirth course as well. That was something I wanted to do, but I waited till the end just because it wasn't a childbirth. It was something I wanted for me. And it was helpful. My instructor, she was really great. The audio that we got really helped me when I was in the bathtub taking lots of baths, just kind
Mhm.
of focus on my breathing and think about my body and opening up and just really helping it along. So, in summary, I was excited. I was being patient for him to just come because I knew it was my first time, so he might go over. And I was a bit nervous just because I was worried about preeclampsia a little bit. I know it happens in Black women fairly enough. My diet wasn't the great because I was kind of nauseous during pregnancy. So I was just really trying to pay attention to my limbs, make sure they weren't swelling too crazy, and just checking my blood pressure and stuff. So that was kind of thing. I was like, I got to get to 37 weeks so I can
Mhm.
have this home birth because that was their cutoff time. So as soon as I got 37 weeks, I was like, woo, like we're good. Yay.
So you're really focused on trying to keep your body as like
Yes.
safe and comfortable as
Y
possible.
yes, that was my
Mhm.
main focus. I wish I would've maybe worked out a bit more, but I was doing so much around the house all the time. I was like, "This has to count. I
Mhm.
don't need to go for a walk, like, this has to count." Like, I'm getting, like, 10,000 steps plus as a 3rd trimester woman, like, almost every day, like, I'll be okay.
Mhm. So when did you reach 40 weeks? Did you go past your due date or what
Yes.
happened?
He ended up coming on 40 and 5. So,
Mhm.
day 40 was my first day of maternity leave. So, I woke up that morning and I used the washroom and I had a bit of mucus, like in a little pink in it. So I was like, oh, okay, that's new. Like, okay, that's different. I didn't have Braxton Hicks. I didn't have any discharge or leaking. It was just like straight pregnant, 40 days all the way. So I was like, okay, this is cool. So I told, and I think I started having like little baby cramps. So I told my doula, and Tuesday we had an appointment with them because at that point I was over 40. So now we were going to be going in twice a week to do the non stress test. So we went to the non stress test. Everything was fine. There were no contractions, but everything was okay. So she told me that at 41, that's when we'll start talking about maybe having to do some induction if we get there. So the following week, if I want to do a membrane sweep or anything like that. But she told me just to try to relax. And she told me to get some evening primrose oil tablets and to insert them vaginally at nighttime. So I got those Tuesday and I did that. So I did that Tuesday, I think Wednesday, and then Thursday, no, Wednesday, I was like, ooh, these little baby cramps are really kind of, I mean, I've been feeling, they don't hurt, but they're like pretty feeling them like all the time now. So my husband took off. He stayed home, and I think my father in law was in town at that time. So we did a bunch of projects around the house, like last minute, putting shelves up and non essential things like plant stuff that I had going on over here. And baby didn't end up coming. So I was like, oh man, I made you take off for, no, I felt a little bad. But I was in his gaming room watching him play video games at like 11 Wednesday night. And I was texting my doula. So I was texting her like, hey, I've been having these cramps, Bobby took off, but I don't think anything's going to happen tonight. And she was like, well, okay, well, how far apart are you? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been timing them. There's just like little baby cramps, like, so I was like, okay, let me get the little counter app and start timing them. And I was like, oh, wow, these actually are kind of like, they have a pattern. It wasn't 1 minute, it wasn't consistent. It was like 30 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes apart, 4 minutes apart, 6 minutes, five. It was real sporadic. So I was like, okay, it's probably still not going to start. So I was like, okay. I let her know that. I did that for an hour and I let her know. And so I was like, okay, I think around 12 or 1, I told my husband, I'm going to go lay down because I was like, I think maybe baby will be ready to come soon. If I go take some Tylenol PM, Julie said that you could do that. So I took the Tylenol PM to try to get some sleep and I laid down. And about 2 hours later, around 3, I woke up. I waken up by a definite wave. Like, I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting in bed like, okay, all right, that's a real one. So I was like, okay, let me lay back down. I lay back down and another one came up and I was like, nope, can't lay down. This is not comfortable for me. Like, I cannot do this. So I got up and I got on my birthing ball, which I had been using all the time. And I was just in the bedroom in the dark, like rolling around on the ball. My husband comes in at 3 in the morning. He looks at me, comes over and like puts his hand on my shoulder. And I'm like, stop. Like, it's not that time yet. Like, go to sleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, you need to go to bed because this is real now, I think. So he laid down and I think I rolled in a bit and I was just starting to feel like, okay, it's really early. I know it's really early, but I don't know what's going on right now. Kind of like I know, but I'm not sure. So I asked my doula if she could come. I felt a little bad because I didn't want her to come like real early, but
Mhm.
I did feel like I need somebody here who like knows what's happening right now.
So you were good by yourself for a little while, and then you were like,
Yes.
"Okay, now I need."
Yeah, I was just like, I don't know what to expect or what's going to happen. So let me call her and see if she can come. So we were all, I don't know any of us. She had been up late. Bobby was up late. I was up late. It was crazy. Of course, when the baby's getting ready to come, all of us had no sleep. So she ended up coming. I think she got there around 5. When she told me she was on her way, I just came downstairs. I started printing out my signs, putting them up. I had some signs like shoes off, quiet space, and stuff like that, so that if, people need to go somewhere and talk, they could go downstairs or and I started putting all the snacks out for the midwives because I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a whole thing, like they're going to have the snacks, they're going to have the coffee, like people are going to have to be sleeping on the couch, like it's going to be a whole thing. So I set all that stuff out and walking around, like taking my little breaths with my early stage labor contractions. So she gets there and she bought a bunch of stuff, but she bought like a TENS machine. That's what it's called, right? TENS.
Mhm.
That thing was really nice. I really liked it because it had the little vibrations. I had put it on my hips and I really liked the way it felt. And so we went into the nursery now, which is where the birthing pool was. And I had like a chair to sit. And I sat in it. She started massaging my feet and stuff. And then I started falling asleep. So we moved to the bed. We have an incline bed. So I had her put the bed up because I was getting really tired. I pushed the bed up to incline and I kind of I leaned on the high part like this and
Mhm.
put like a pillow on my belly and just like had contractions and tried to rest in between them. And all three of us ended up taking like a 3 hour nap. So it was really nice. But then we woke up and we basically just spent the rest of the day going through the house with me on the ball, them massaging me, eating, listening to music. I had a bunch of playlists. And then, yeah, that was pretty much how early labor started. I think early labor probably started. We were supposed to go to the midwives that day. That was our second non-stress test that would have been on Thursday. So Bobby called them. Our appointment was like 11. Bobby called them, told them that I was having contractions. We told them what time they were. They still weren't very consistent, but they were there. Like I knew like, okay, this is either I'm about to have a prodromal labor where I'm going to be in labor for like 3 days or this is it. Like, but this is definitely starting. So they told us we didn't have to come in because I was like, I really don't want to drive up there. Like, I'm clearly having contractions. I don't want to go. So they let us stay. They told us to keep us posted. I think that was the first time he called them. We went on a walk. It was hot and that was weird walking so much and having contractions. But I just did until I was tired. And then we came back. I took a bath for a while, listened to my hypnobirthing episodes, got out the bath, we're around, I think around 5 or 6 is when I felt myself transition into active labor. And that's when I was like, okay, I started to have to rolling on the ball at the time of the contractions. It became uncomfortable to be sitting. So I found myself like lifting myself up with my hands in order to have the waves, or I would have to stand and lean against something. I think we had to do a bit of nipple stimulation because my contractions still, they were not just really regular. So Bobby ran out and got a manual breast pump. So they were helping me do that. And still, this whole time it's just been me, Bobby, and Vaisha, and our dog Reeses, which he was not helpful, but he's cute, so I guess that counts. Yeah, so I think we were in the kitchen and I was like going through the active labor waves and I was like, I'm tired. So I went on the couch and I got in that same position. I put my forearms on the back of the couch and had my legs on the cushions. And I just laid down to like, I'm just gonna have to get whatever I can. I felt the need to rest. Like I just had to rest. It was tiring lifting myself up. And then when I
Hmm.
was standing, because I was squatting and kind of like rocking, my legs and back were getting tired. So I need to rest my body. Laying down wasn't an option because that felt awful.
So you're kind of
So,
resting in this like hands and knees, or like
yeah,
kind of kneeling, but resting your upper body on the couch.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So we did that. And remember waking up and Bobby was like, okay, that was like 19 minutes in between the last contraction. I'm like, 19 minutes? Like I was asleep. Like I really went to sleep. That was the weirdest thing. And then I was like, okay. So he called the midwives, told them that like I think at that point they had told us to monitor for an hour without the nipple stimulation to see if we were inducing contractions with the nipple stimulation or if they were actually indeed coming together.
Hmm.
But they still weren't very consistent. They were definitely coming, but it wasn't hitting their, what is it, the 1 in 5, like their
Hmm.
specific number of like 1 minute.
You didn't fall on any kind of like graph
Yeah,
of like, here's where they should be. It was just, but they
exactly.
were real. You were
They
experiencing
were
real
definitely real.
contractions. Yeah.
Yes, they were 100% real. I was breathing and grunting and doing all the noises, but they just weren't fitting their timeline. So she told me again, this was probably around 9 or 10 or something. So
At
they
night.
told us, yes,
Okay, so you've been at this for almost 24 hours at this
yes.
point.
At this
Yeah.
point, it's almost the next day, 24-hour day. Yes. And so she told me to take another bath, to have a glass of wine, take a bath, and then just try to relax. And we'll see what happens then. So I went upstairs, ran a tub. Bobby had gotten these Google Chrome lights. So I had them plugged into our bathroom, into the nursery, and into the bedroom. So you could control it from the app and make like different textures and colors. So I had all of upstairs was in this low light purple. Purple's my favorite color, and it had been the color I had been using when I was taking my baths and listening to my podcast and listening to my own playlist and hypnobirthing. So I really was in a space where like, okay, this is comfortable. It was really dark, but it was lit, and I had my playlist going. I remember I took a glass of wine, a picture of the bathroom with me, like the tub and like the glass of wine, because my friends kept asking me, like, "Is the baby here? Is the baby here?" I was like, "All right, ladies, like just pray for like me to get 3 hours of sleep, so that I can finish this out because I'm definitely contracting by just like 3 hours. Give me 3 hours." That did not happen. I did go to sleep, and I think I took another Tylenol PM actually. I did go to sleep, and about an hour later, I had positioned myself where I was on my back. About an hour later, bam, this huge wave like startled me out of my sleep. I flipped over onto my hands and knees in the tub to have the wave, and I was like, woo, like, oh man, that one was intense. And I was like, okay, well, let me just try to lay back down for an hour. No, like immediately it came again, and then it came again, and I was like, okay, I think I got to get out this tub now. I don't know why I felt like I had to take a shower because I just wanted to be like super clean or something. It was weird. I'm about to get back in water and have birth, but I don't know. I had to like shower after the bath. So I'm trying in the shower, trying to like clean my body while having these huge waves that were like, they were knocking me out. They were intense. So I was cleaning myself and then I reached down and there was just mucus plug all over my hand. So I was like, oh, this is go time for real. Like the bit of mucus plug I had before did not compare to what this was. Like it must have all just come out at one time. So I finally got the shower. I was trying to get my robe on. I think I ended up having a couple contractions on the toilet as well, which was so uncomfortable for me. And I remember thinking, like, man, all these positions that people say, oh, you can maybe do on the toilet, like they had a great time on the toilet or they were laying sideways or something. I'm like, I hate all of these. Like, they hurt so bad. So I woke my husband up by being very vocal in the bathroom with contractions. So by the time I opened the door, he was like, okay. He called Baisha to wake her up because she had fallen asleep on the couch. And so she came up. She was like, yeah, I think it's time for them to come now. Like, yeah, they need to come. So he called the midwives to tell them that we think it's time. I'm pretty sure they could hear me in the background. And then I had him call my mom and my cousin because my mom, she was just going to be there. But my cousin, had asked her if she could do videography and take pictures for me. So they both actually got here before the midwives did. And I was still just upstairs at this point. I really wanted to get in the tub, but it wasn't ready. Bobby had this was his dad moment. He did make a bit of an error. He didn't put the lining in the tub at first. So it's a rented tub. So if you don't put the lining in, you basically own it now because there's going to be bodily fluid that has to get filtered out of it and everything. So he had started filling up with the hot water and forgot to put the lining in. So he did okay. He ended up, I was worried, like, oh no, it's not going to be hot enough now. Like, we used all the scalding water, but he like put it into like a tote, poured it over, and then put the lining in, and then poured the water
Oh, so
back
you
in.
saved
So
the hot water.
he
And that
saved it.
is definitely a thing with home birth.
Yeah,
It's like you can run out of hot water for
of
that water
hot
birthing.
water. Yeah. And the first layer they want you to put on to be like scalding hot water, and then to like fill it up with
Mhm.
regular water so that it's at the appropriate temperature. So I'm like, there's no way we have any more like straight hot water left after he already started filling it. But it worked out. He got it done. So at this point, I'm naked because I had my robe on, but I like came out and I was so hot. And I like told Vaisha, like, get this robe off of me. So I'm in the bedroom, standing in front of the bed, and I like was just rolling, trying to roll my hips to keep them open, and like squatting into the contractions, and just really being really vocal about my breaths, keeping them low. I also read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, which was okay, but I liked the stories just talking about how women were moving through their labors. And so I really focused on trying to just squat into and make sure my hips felt open, and really thinking about pushing all of my energy down into my pelvis and wide the whole time. So that was kind of where my mindset was. So the midwives showed up.
And what time was this then?
I think they must have come around, it had to be like 1:30, 2 o'clock.
So this is
Um,
1:32 in the morning the next day. Okay.
yes, next day, this is Friday now,
Mhm.
Friday the 18th. So yeah, they came around 1, 2, and it was a midwife and her assistant. So they had a Doppler and they put it on my stomach to listen to baby. And I hated that. I don't know. It was such a, they had to use the Doppler. You know, the Doppler is so small. It's just like a
Mhm.
little thing. It was so uncomfortable with me. I can't imagine how people have straps of stuff like all over them. Like even that little act, I was just like, oh, be done. Like he's fine. I didn't know it was a he at that time, but baby's fine. Like we're good. Go away. So she listened. He was good. And she's like, okay, well, we're going to have to check you. And I'm like, oh man, like, I'm going to have to lay on my back. And she's like, yeah. So I'm like, oh God, I was really dreading it because the laying down contractions were just awful for me. So I waited till one was done and then like scurried over to the bed super fast and like flopped down on my back so she could text me because I wanted it to be done like before the next one came. So she checked me and I was a little nervous because I was like, man, I've been
Been in
going through
labor
it
for a
for,
while. Yeah.
yeah, like we did the day stuff, we did the afternoon stuff, we did the late evening stuff, and these ones are legit. So I'm like, if she says I'm like 6 centimeters right now, I might cry. Like I'm gonna stick through this because I'm stubborn, but I might cry because that's much longer. But she checked me and she's like, do you want to know? And I thought about it and I was like, okay. And she said, you're 8 centimeters. And I was like, hallelujah. I literally said that and everybody in the room started cracking up. They still talk about that because I was like, yes, oh, thank goodness, like 8 centimeters. That
Yes.
is good. So I'm still waiting for the tub to get done. And finally, somebody, I think the midwife, she's like, oh, would you like to get in the tub now? I'm like, yes, please. Like, I've been waiting for somebody to just come and get me and tell me it's ready. So went over there, got in the tubs, huge. I felt immediate relief, like, oh, this is so nice. But then, like, contractions came, like, bam, again. So I basically, I guess that kneeling position really was my jam. I got kneeling in the tub and I held onto the handles that were on the side of it and really just like let myself go into all the things. My doula had been, hip pressure was really my thing. I think Julie introduced that to us during the class when we had a section where she was let us go into different birth positions and had the support person, which was Bobby, just practice those things. The hip pressure really was what helped me. I didn't feel like I had any pain in my back, but I don't know, just the counter pressure on my hips really felt good to me. That was my doula was like rubbing down my back. Just those two things were like more than enough. They were perfect for me. I didn't need anything else that really helped me. It was just her in that motion, calming motion, and helping me reconnect with my breath, and Bobby squeezing my hips. He got in the tub, so he did get in and was in there with me and was squeezing my hips. So this must have been three something. We must have been at around 3 o'clock then at this point, because I started having the deep voices, but then I could feel pressure, like, and it was getting, I started making this really high pitched like scream when he would, I guess he was crowning or coming down. I wasn't really sure. I could feel in my pelvis, like, I told them, like, the head is coming. Like, I could feel him. I think, like, the head is coming, but they kept trying to look, and I guess they couldn't see anything. And they, like, Bobby at one point tried to touch, and I was like, no, I was like, don't touch me. Like, I just did not like that. And I thought in my head, I was like, okay, doing the course we had and all the birth videos I've watched and everything I read, like, okay, baby's head is going to come out, and then I'll probably reach down and touch then, and then, go with the rest of the contractions for the rest of their body to come out. So that's where my mindset was, like, I'm not going to touch. I don't want to touch. Like, if I take my hands off of these handles while I'm having these contractions, like, everything's going to be messed up. Like, I really need to just breathe and have my hand on these handles and brace my body for the next wave. So I was hitting these high pitched like screams. The midwives were not in the room. Like, they had gone into the next bedroom to do some paperwork stuff, because I guess, I mean, I told them that I felt like baby was coming, and my groans had turned into a bit of a scream sometimes at the top, like, I guess at the peak of the contraction. And then my doula was really helping me connect with my breath again after they came down again. So I was doing some more screaming, some more breathing. I felt his head, I guess, come. It was like boop, and then it was like broop, and the rest of him just came right out. Like, it was all in
All
one.
in one.
Yeah, all in one. It was like boop, broop. That's how I felt. That's a weird noise to make, but Bobby, there's the language. Bobby, he's like, oh shit. Behind me. And my doula's like, that's a baby, pick it up. So he picks baby up. And then this time the woodwives come in, because now they hear baby crying. They're like, what? What's going on? So they get in there. My doula's like, what time is it? So she got his birth time. He had his cord wrapped around once around the neck. I think Bobby was a little bit nervous about that. But they told him, like, oh, just unwrap it. Don't dip his head back in the water. We didn't know what he was. We had two names. I wanted a girl really bad, but he's like, oh, it's an Alexander. And Alexander is my brother's middle name. So we had decided that we were going to use a name to honor him. And yeah, and then he was there. I remember felt something on my back, because they're like, oh, you could turn around, see your baby. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, can you just give me a second? Like, I had to breathe and like, like, that was a lot of work. Let me just give me a second to turn around. So my cord was really long, so it was easy for me to turn around. And then I was just like, oh gosh, there's a baby. So weird. It was weird. I don't know. But it was great. It was great. It was
It's
amazing.
thrilling to have like this real baby on your chest at that
Yes.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't like I'm not a huge kid person. I wasn't a huge baby person. Honestly, I always knew that I wanted to be pregnant and experience labor, but
Mhm.
then I was kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do with the kid afterwards? So it was
Mm.
weird to have like a baby, like, and then it was like I made him and he had been there this whole time, and his eyes were wide open. He was alert. He was awake, like just looking around for like 45 minutes. We were in the pool. So I really only spent about 17 minutes in the pool before he came. He came really fast after that. And then, yeah, it was really just really great. My mom missed it because my husband had asked her to go get some water for him, and she left. I told her she's crazy. I would have been like, okay, and sat the water like right there and stayed down in the hallway, but she missed the actual birth. but it was fine. I mean, she was here. And yeah, they came, they got all his vitals. He was good. I didn't bleed much at all. I stayed in the tub for a while and then we finally got out so they could check me. So we went to the bed. They did all, weigh him and do all the
Did you give
things.
birth to the placenta in the tub or
I
in the
did,
bed?
yes. I
Okay.
did give birth to placenta in the tub, which was funny because she was like, okay, so now I'll just push the placenta out like you pushed your baby out. And I was like, what? Like, I
'Cause
didn't
you
push.
didn't push. You had the fetal ejection reflex, right?
Yes,
Where the baby
yes.
just came out.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was like, "Push, what do you mean push?" Like, I breathed, like, I just was breathing the whole time.
Uh-huh.
So that was a little weird because I tried to push, but then it wasn't coming, so she ended up they told me to sit up more, and I really was like, "Okay," I focused on it, and then it came out fine. But yeah, that was really weird when they were like, "Oh, push it out like you push a baby," and I was like, "I
I
don't know
don't
how
have
to
any
do that."
memory of pushing a baby out. It just came
No,
out.
not at all. He just was there. So, it was cool.
I wonder, Shalitha, you talked about making a lot of noise and feeling somewhat out of control. Do you think maybe the people there perceived you to be calmer than you felt on the inside?
Yes,
Okay.
and to be honest, I was making a lot of noise, but the only time I felt out of control was when I think he was crowning, and
Mhm.
that's when my like, everything was just like, "Oh," I
So
was
you were
being
making
just
noise, but you seemed kind of calm to these
yes,
people
and
observing.
I
Okay.
do think that they thought honestly, my doula, she keeps saying, like, "I shouldn't have had you as one of my first clients, like, because you were so great, like, you were basically the midwife because you were so like, you knew everything." And I think so. I think they thought like, "Okay, well, she's a first-time mom, she
Mm.
probably is making a lot of
She'll have to push
noises,"
for a
but
long time and yeah.
yeah, and because Bobby had only called them maybe, like, 3 times the whole
Mhm.
time. He called them in the morning when we were supposed to go to the appointment. He called them again in the evening when we were kinda doing the nipple stimulation type thing, and then he called them to tell them to come. So, I
Mhm.
think maybe they did think that
It was gonna take a little bit longer.
yeah, than what it was. I mean, I was 8 centimeters when they
Mhm.
checked me, so
Yeah, you
I
weren't
did all
that
that by
far.
me.
Well, and I think one of the only negatives, I don't know if you can really call it a negative, but the only drawback to using hypnosis for managing pain in the research is that it does happen more often that the healthcare workers like don't realize how far along you are or how
That
fast
makes
things are
sense.
moving because you kind of project this just sense of calm
Um,
and peace that a lot of people don't have when they get to that stage, so you were making
yeah,
noise, but you were not panicking or freaking out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I could definitely see that. I think that yes, that is valid, and I will say, I do believe I had a really golden ticket, but one of the things I really wanted, I kinda wish I woulda had a Black midwife, and it's not
Mhm.
to say anything about gentle birth, they did a great job, like, I mean,
Mhm.
they honestly didn't do too much at the birth, but the prenatal and
Mhm.
everything was amazing. But, yeah, I could just like, when they came in the space, the environment changed just a little bit. I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe it was a combination of that, but, who knows what maybe small
Well, and
biases
I
may have
I feel like I've interviewed a lot of Black women on the podcast who have a similar experience of kind of like not being necessarily believed that they're about to push the baby out. So,
Yeah,
and you combine that with the hypnosis and or like kind of the feeling of calm that you were projecting. And
mm.
I think that the implicit bias along with like not understanding that people look differently and labor differently with hypnosis can combine to missing a birth.
I think that makes a bunch of sense. Yeah, that
Mhm.
sounds about right,
Yeah.
actually.
Mhm.
'Cause they were pleasant, but it was just especially because I think in the video, she even says the midwife is like, "Oh my gosh, like, next time you gotta scream or something," and I was like, "I was screaming." Like, everybody
You
in
were
the room
screaming, yeah.
yeah, everybody in the room was like, "She was, though." She was definitely screaming, so what it
Interesting, yeah.
yeah, so, but like I said, it ended up being I mean, it kinda worked out. It didn't have I said the space changed a little bit, so it
Mhm.
worked out if they weren't in there because it was
Maybe that's what your
exactly
body needed too.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
me, Bobby, Baisha, and my cousin, and it was
Mhm.
perfect, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think that makes a bunch of sense
Mhm.
between the hypno and that because I was definitely really focused inward on I was aware of everything that was going on,
Hmm.
but I definitely was making sure that my breathing was my main focus and making sure I wasn't tensing my body up. I really just wanted to try to stay relaxed as possible, and it worked. It worked well.
And so baby arrived safely and you had the water birth you'd been planning at home.
Yeah, it was great.
And how was your postpartum
So
recovery?
postpartum was really good. Me and Bobby really want to focus on spending a lot of our time with just us. I didn't think that I wanted a lot of people in, and that ended up being true. My parents and his parents, they did end up coming over on my brother's birthday on Father's Day, which was that Sunday, and it was Alexander's third day here. So we had a really long day that day. People were basically over from like 10 o'clock to like almost
Mm.
Vaisha came, my doula came over again, and so then there was this huge storm. So she didn't end up leaving till like 1 just because we were like tornado sirens were going off. We ended up getting into one of the closets at one point because we were worried about, a tornado coming. So it ended up being a really long day. Everything was good. The only problem is Alexander ended up having lip and tongue ties, and I was
Mm.
breastfeeding.
Mhm.
And I really wish I would have listened to myself because tongue ties became on my radar. One of your episodes, there was a lady who had experienced ties, and she was talking about that. So I had that in the back of my mind as something that was a possibility. And I kept looking, I was just looking at his little chin and I was looking at things were going on. And the pain was like really bad when he was breastfeeding. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be that mom who thinks everything's wrong with her kid,
Mm.
which I should have been that mom because he did end up having ties that did not go. Everybody was like, oh, it's not a big deal. But I ended up taking him to a pediatric dentist and he had a pretty tight lower lip and upper and a tongue. So we ended up getting that fixed and it did help, but I wish I just would have gotten it done a little bit earlier because my milk supply didn't really kick in how it should have because he wasn't
He wasn't
feeding
yeah, he wasn't
properly.
sucking strongly enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so by time, it had set already, like, "Okay, well, this is what we're gonna produce," and it was really hard for me to try to get any more. So that kinda bummed out, but blessedly, we've been able to get donor milk this whole time, so I
Oh,
still have been
wow.
able to have him exclusively breast milk, no
Mhm.
formula, which no shade to anybody who uses formula, I just did not want
I
to.
don't know if I've had anybody talk about that yet. How did you get the donor milk? Did you reach out
Okay.
to friends and family or how did
So
you
this actually ended up being super great. I know it's kind of sounds sketchy, but I first went on Facebook to see if I could find some groups that like knew about it, and I ended up finding a group called Human Milk for Human Babies. It's Human Milk, the number 4 Human Babies, and it's a group on Facebook, and it's actually a collective. So they go by states. So I joined the Human Milk for Human Babies Illinois, and on there, it's just a bunch of women, sometimes their partners, saying, like, hey, I have a bunch of oversupply milk. These are the medications that I'm on. I'm vaccinated. I don't do dairy or whatever it is, or I don't have a specific diet. I'm not vaccinated. I'm on Zoloft or something like that. How many ounces I have in this area, and you can request to get the milk from them, or you can post yourself, say, I'm in this area and I need such and such for my however month old baby. So
Mhm.
there are a bunch of different NICU babies, babies with milk allergies, or maybe they had started pumping, but now they have an allergy, so their supply is gone.
Oh, yeah.
Or people who just had like toddlers, older ones, so their milk was supplied, but they still maybe got sick or something and they wanted to get some milk with antibodies and stuff in it. So that was great. I'm blessed to be in the Chicagoland area because it's a huge area. Chicago, obviously a really big city, but the suburban area, the greater Chicagoland, is also quite large. So there were a bunch of people in the northwest suburbs and the south suburbs. So we ended up going to the city to get milk. We've been to the north suburbs. I had my parents pick up milk sometimes. I had my doula friends pick up milk for us sometimes. So I just really been hustling to get that. And you can pasteurize at home basically. So if you like Google, there's like 2 methods. It's just a heating process to, I guess, kill most of the bacteria that can go through. So we did that. I did that, I should say. My husband did not do any of that. I did that. And yeah, I just refroze a bunch of milk and we've been able to do that since. I did try to go to do the donation to pay. It's really expensive, unfortunately. But also because of the pandemic, I guess there's a bottle shortage. So they were really only focusing on getting milk to babies in NICU,
Hmm.
not for outpatient. So that kind of it bummed me, but it ended up working out because I was able to get free milk from women who just had excess and
Hmm.
were willing to help. And that was a great blessing. Anybody, if you have an oversupply and you're not getting rid of it, please just try to find moms
Hmm.
who are looking for milk because it really was a great. There's lots of people out there who are not weirded out by sharing milk with other women.
I think, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that part of your story because I don't think it's talked about enough. Often, if you have a milk shortage yourself, the first thing you're told to do is supplement with formula rather
Yes.
than getting checked out by a lactation consultant or even the option of trying to pump extra, which
Mhm.
sometimes is an option if you're able to bump up your supply by pumping more. Then also the whole option of like donor milk. And I know some pediatricians probably look down on this, but to me, I
Yes.
can totally see how some parents would rather use donor milk from, someone who discloses what is in their milk and then using a formula which, for them the benefits might outweigh like the risks or disadvantages. So I think that's really, especially it's really interesting, with formula shortages we're seeing this year for the first time.
Exactly. And that
So
was that's exactly why I knew I wanted my son to have breast milk exclusively for the benefits, health benefits, and just because I'm like, okay, he's got the rest of his life to hop onto the standard American diet of
mhm,
processed foods. I don't want his first year to just, be introduced to that. And then it's expensive. And then I was in a bunch of mom groups and they're all like, oh, well, this formulate my son broke out or this made them sick or this. And it's like, so you have to hop around to find the one that works
find the
for
right
them.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, this seems like way more work than
Mhm.
what the benefit would be. Now I got to get up, make a bottle. Like, it was, I didn't,
Mhm.
I definitely I did the first pediatrician we had, she made me feel so bad every time we went in there because he had the tie. So he was 6'13". He lost the weight, but they expected to come back 2 weeks. He did get to that weight, but then for like a month before I had really diagnosed his tie, he didn't gain weight. He didn't lose any weight.
But he wasn't gaining.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he wasn't gaining. And then after that, he did gain, but he's like gained slow. He gained at least a pound each month,
Mhm.
but she was saying like, "Oh, he's not on his curve." And I mean, he did, according to his curve, he was like at the 2 percentile, 1 percentile for a bit
Mhm.
before I got him diagnosed. And then once
Mhm.
we did, it was great, but she made it seem like he should have instantaneously started gaining weight.
Mhm.
But I'm like, it's been like 2 months. He's got to learn how to latch now
Mhm.
with his new mouth. Like, I have to get used to it and everything. So I was not comfortable with her. And that's what she did. Oh, so you guys aren't interested in a formula? I'm just like, lady, I had unmedicated home water birth and I'm exclusively breastfeeding. No, I don't want to use formula. I've been going through all this breast pain. You think I'm just going to pop formula in him? No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, um, I ended up what happened? We had to go in to a checkup and it was a holiday week. Maybe it was 4th of July and there was a different pediatrician there and she was amazing. Like, she was like, oh, he's doing so great, he looks good, look, his little curve is going up, blah blah blah. And so I was like, hey, can I have her, because we were looking for other places at this point, and they said I could switch to her and she's been
Yeah.
phenomenal ever since, make
It
me
makes
feel
such a
like,
difference having, a care provider for your child who is like telling you you're doing a great job. Like, I don't know,
yeah.
for me, that was really when I was a first time parent and my pediatrician was like, you both are doing awesome with this baby. It was like, oh, well, I am. Thank you. Like, cause you
Thank
feel so
you.
uncertain about yourself. So to have that
Yeah.
like reassurance, like from somebody rather than somebody being kind of judgy and,
Yeah.
acting like you're a threat to your child and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I felt because I mean, I knew he was small and obviously I'm concerned about it. But I mean,
Mhm.
the first one, she was like, well, maybe your milk isn't calorie rich enough. Like, so she was like, I'm like, what? Like, she's telling me my milk is not good enough now at this point because it's not fattening him up the way she
Mhm.
wanted him to be. And
Mhm.
it's just like, and he's good. He's like, now he's nice and chunky on his little thighs and stuff. Like he's super strong. And that was the other thing. He was meeting all his milestones. He was every time
Yeah.
she would put him on the table and she'd be like, oh, 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 like because of all the things he was doing, but then turns around telling me like he needs to be on formula because he's not fat enough.
Mhm.
It was very
Yeah.
stressful.
Well, Shalita, thank you so much for sharing your journey. We only have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to just quickly ask you, did this experience, was this part of what got you more interested in birth work, or what do you think your next steps are going to be, or what are your dreams about that?
Yeah, it really did. And honestly, I am trying to figure out what I can do to kind of get involved. My friend, I'm trying to get her into midwifery school. She's taking the steps she wants to. I think she's finally going to do it. She's got 3 kids and a husband and stuff. So, of course, life. But I am thinking about how I can maybe support her in the future. I don't know if I would be a good birth doula, but I'm thinking maybe a postpartum doula might be something I would be interested in because I think I could really help in that regards with just taking care of mom and if, necessary, but not just necessarily being there for the actual birth.
Mhm.
So I'll see. We have bills to pay, so I have to keep my 9 to 5 for now. But I am keeping it open to do something. I don't know if it's going to be research or
Mhm.
do the work in the future, but I definitely am excited to get more moms to kind of have a similar experience I have because I honestly feel like I get a bit of a negative energy by just telling people how positive of a birth story I get
Mm.
because it seems like there's so many women out there who just are not getting, and maybe it's honestly because I'm a Black woman and a lot of the women I talk to are Black women, but they're just not having the same positive birth stories that I did. And even if
Mhm.
they don't have a home water birth like me, I know there are listening to your podcast, you know that there are ways that you can have a positive hospital birth. And I think a lot of women don't know how to go about doing that. And
Yeah.
that's something that I definitely want because it was such a great experience.
Mhm. Well, maybe childbirth education would be a good field for you, like teaching.
Maybe
Yeah,
that
that's
might
an
be that might be it, Rebecca. You might be onto something. I'll put
because
that down on
you
my
have an
list.
inspiring story and personal experience, and you want to spread the word about different options, and you used about pretty much every comfort measure I think you could possibly have tried. So you have a lot of personal experience now from that
Yes.
one birth. But I think it's really whatever you end up doing, I think you're just gonna be an inspiration to people around you because being able to share that you can have a positive birth and that there are ways to do it and just like spreading the word that you don't have to have a traumatizing birth, especially, even with your first time baby. And even as
Yes.
a Black birthing person in America, you can still be empowered as you're
Yes. You
bringing your
can be
baby into the
so
world.
empowered.
Yeah.
Yes. Listen to Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. Just stream the whole thing and then decide what birth course you're going to take, which I suggest this one.
Well, thanks, Shalene.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. We really love hearing your positive experience and how empowering it was and how you and your family are thriving. It's so exciting.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate all you do for all the women and men and folks out there with birth work. It is definitely, I don't think I would have been able to have the experience I had without your podcast. So thank you.
This podcast episode was brought to you by the Evidence Based Birth Childbirth Class. This is Rebecca speaking. When I walked into the hospital to have my first baby, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Since then, I've met countless parents who felt that they too were unprepared for the birth process and navigating the healthcare system. The next time I had a baby, I learned that in order to have the most empowering birth possible, I needed to learn the evidence on childbirth practices. We are now offering the Evidence-Based Birth Childbirth Class totally online. In your class, you will work with an instructor who will skillfully mentor you and your partner in evidence-based care, comfort measures, and advocacy, so that you can both embrace your birth and parenting experiences with courage and confidence. Get empowered with an interactive online childbirth class you and your partner will love. Visit evidencebased birth.com/childbirth class to find your class now.